From the very first second Clay Maddox stepped onto the sprawling Triple M ranch, he understood one thing. He needed this job more than the ranch needed him. It was the middle of the hardest drought the West had seen in 20 years, and something about the dust in the wind felt like a warning. But he didn't care not when his sick mother needed medicine, not when his little sister back home wrote letters telling him, "Clay, we're holding on because we believe in you." He believed in himself too, until the day everything changed. Clay had worked at dozens of ranches before, but none as big, powerful, or iron-ruled as the Triple M, owned by the unforgiving cattle baron Marshall McGraw. McGraw was built like a mountain and twice as cold. Men whispered that the only thing he loved on this earth more than land was control. Clay didn't mind. He was a quiet worker, steady, respectful, always finishing his chores before sunrise. McGraw liked that. He liked it so much that Clay began working closer and closer to the main house, eventually becoming the rancher's most trusted hand, which is why the ultimatum hit him like a whip. It happened on a Sunday, the only day the men got an hour or two to breathe. Clay was brushing one of McGraw's prized stallions when the ranch owner stormed into the stable. His jaw was locked tight, fists clenched, eyes darker than usual. "Clay," he said, "I'm running out of patience. There's only two ways forward for you on my land. Marry my daughter, or leave and never come back." Clay nearly dropped the brush, stared, trying to decide whether he'd heard right. Marshall McGraw's daughter Lydia was never seen. The ranch hands never caught a glimpse of her. Rumors said she was terribly disfigured, kept hidden away like a shameful secret. Some said she'd been burned in a fire as a child. Others swore she was born wrong in the face, so strange-looking it scared cattle. No one knew the truth. Clay swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't understand." McGraw stepped closer. "You're the only decent man who's ever worked here. The others ain't fit to look at her, much less wed her. I need someone steady, loyal, someone who won't run." Clay had never felt pressure like that in his life, not even when men pointed guns at him on cattle drives. His first instinct was to refuse. Marriage wasn't business. Marriage wasn't a command. But then he remembered his mother's fading voice, his sister's letters, the empty pockets that haunted him like ghosts. If McGraw fired him, they'd lose everything. Still, Clay asked, "What if your daughter doesn't want this?" A strange shadow passed over McGraw's face. "She'll do as I say," he growled. "And you'll do as you're told if you want to keep your job." Clay barely slept that night. He wrestled with the choice until dawn, listening to the wind rattle the shutters like bones. He didn't want a forced marriage. He didn't want to be trapped. But he also knew he didn't have the luxury of walking away. The next morning, Clay stood before McGrath and nodded once. "I'll marry her," he said quietly. "If it keeps my job, I will." The wedding was set for Friday, fast, silent, and private. No guests, no music, just a preacher, McGrath, Clay, and the mysterious bride hidden behind a thick lace veil. Clay wasn't even allowed to see her beforehand. The ranch buzzed with whispers. Poor Clay. He'll regret it. She ain't been seen in 5 years. God help him. Clay worked harder than ever, trying to bury the knot in his stomach. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why was she kept hidden? Why was McGraw so desperate? Why did Clay feel like a condemned man heading toward the gallows? Finally, Friday arrived. They married in the small chapel McGraw had on his land. Clay's hands trembled as he slid the ring on a hand he could barely see through the veil. Lydia never spoke, not a word. She stood still, shoulders slightly hunched, breath soft and nervous. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Clay felt the world tilt beneath him. Then McGraw ordered sharply, "Lift the veil." Clay hesitated, swallowing dry fear. What was he about to see? A face twisted by scars, features warped beyond recognition, the kind of horror that made a father hide a daughter away. His fingers reached for the veil. He lifted it slowly, and Clay froze. Lydia wasn't ugly. She wasn't even plain. She was breathtaking. Her face was soft and gentle, framed by long auburn hair that shimmered in the light. Her eyes were the color of green fields after rainbright, sad, intelligent. She looked fragile, but beautiful in a way Clay had never seen. But beneath that beauty was something else, pain, a lifetime of it. Clay almost stepped back. I don't understand." Lydia lowered her gaze. "Oh, I'm sorry," she whispered. "He forced me. I begged him not to do this." McGraw's face stiffened, jaw clenching. Enough, girl. Clay wasn't listening to him anymore. Clayton Maddox, who had survived stampedes, gunfights, and the harshest winters, suddenly felt a new kind of anger, one he'd never known he could feel. Later, when they returned to the big house as husband and wife, Clay took Lydia aside and said softly, "Tell me why he hides you." Lydia hesitated, wringing her hands. "Finally," she whispered, "because he thinks men only want beauty. And he's terrified someone will take me away from him. After my mother died, I was all he had. He said beauty is a curse. So he locked me away, told me the world would hurt me, told me I was better unseen." Clay stared, thunderstruck. "But he told me I know," she said sadly. "He lies, he manipulates, he controls. He says it's for my own good." It all clicked for Clay like lightning. McGraw didn't want to protect Lydia. He wanted to possess her. She wasn't hidden because she was disfigured. She was hidden because she was precious. Too precious for a man as controlling as Marshall McGrath to let the world see. The forced marriage wasn't about Lydia at all. It was about power. But Clay looked at her trembling hands, her haunted eyes, and made a silent vow. He didn't know what kind of marriage they would have, or whether Lydia would ever want him, but he knew he wouldn't let her live as a prisoner. Not anymore. The days that followed were strange and quiet. Lydia kept her distance, unsure of him, afraid of her father, terrified of what came next. Clay gave her space. He slept in the guest room, knocked before entering a room she was in. He spoke softly, respectfully. Little by little, she began to trust him. One night, Lydia came to him in the lamplight, her voice trembling. "You're kind," she whispered. "No one has ever treated me kindly. Not even my father." Clay shook his head. "A woman like you deserves kindness. You deserve a life." Her eyes glistened with tears. "I don't know how to live a life. I've only known walls." "Well," he said gently, "maybe we can learn together." For the first time, she smiled, a small, hopeful thing that warmed the coldest corners of Clay's heart. But Marshall McGrath noticed the change, and he didn't like it. The more Lydia came alive, the more possessive he became. He barked orders. He showed up unannounced. He kicked open doors without knocking. Clay began standing between them, shoulders squared. Tension grew like storm clouds. It all came to a head one evening when McGrath tried to drag Lydia away from the porch where she was watching the sunset with Clay. When Clay stepped between them, McGrath exploded. "You think you own her now?" he roared. "She's mine, and I'll decide what she does." Clay didn't raise a hand. He didn't yell. He simply said, "She's your daughter, not your property." That single sentence lit the fuse. McGraw lunged for his gun, but Lydia screamed, throwing herself between them. Clay moved instantly, shielding her with his own body. "Marshall," Clay said, voice steel, "this ends now. I won't fight you, but I won't let you hurt her." McGraw trembled with rage, torn between shooting Clay or admitting defeat. Finally, he spat on the ground, turned, and stormed off into the darkening yard. That night, Lydia broke down in Clay's arms, sobbing into his chest. "All my life," she whispered, "I've been afraid. Please don't make me go back to that." Clay held her gently, stroking her hair. "You won't. Not ever again." And something shifted, then not forced, not demanded, but real. Lydia rested her head against him, trusting him, choosing him. For the first time since their strange wedding, their hearts aligned. The next morning, Lydia packed her things. They left the ranch quietly, riding toward a small town, a day's journey away, a place where Clay had friends, where they could build a life without McGraw's shadow. Marshall McGraw never came after them. Some said he died of a heart attack weeks later. Others said guilt broke him. Clay and Lydia never knew for certain. They never went back. But they built a peaceful life in the valley town of Clearwater. Lydia bloomed like a wildflower finally given sunlight. Clay found steady work and a family more meaningful than anything he'd ever imagined. Love grew between them, not because it was forced, but because it was earned slowly, gently, honestly. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, Lydia would whisper, "Thank you." "For what?" Clay would ask. "For lifting the veil," she'd say softly. "Not just the wedding one, but the one over my whole life." Clay would kiss her forehead and reply, "I didn't lift it. You stepped out from behind it." Their story became a whispered lesson in the valley, that beauty isn't a curse, control isn't love, and freedom sometimes begins with the courage to walk away. And Clay Maddox, once a desperate cowboy trapped by someone else's command, found the one thing he never expected when he said yes to a forced marriage: a real partner, a real home, a real life.